Boker Tov, happy Yom Yerushalayim, 43rd day of the Omer, Erev Rosh Chodesh. Okay, we pick up, today's daf is Hey, we pick up at the bottom of Dal Lamed Bet, about 10 lines from the bottom, Tani Rabbi Chia. So we have worked through the different explanations of the Mishnah, Shur, Bor, Mav, and Hever. We've discussed that if an animal walking kicks stones, it pays half because it's sort of a kocho plus it's incidental. We've discussed the idea that one way that you can read the Mishnah that has Adam in the Mishnah, and that would maybe conceptualize it even by a person who damages himself. It would be more because of negligence than by the fact that they've done it. Two ways of understanding why a person pays is basically they did it, strict liability or negligence. Similar type of a question about why you pay when your animals do it. Okay, and now we have listing braitas that add other things to the list of avos nezikin. So Rabbi Yoshaya expanded the list of types of cases where human beings can cause damage, and he included, first of all, personal injury, where you have extra payments of suffering and of loss of labor and of the hospital bills and etc. And he included cases of the shomrim, which don't directly cause damage, but through their negligence, or even if it's not negligence, like a shoel, but somehow they are liable for damage. Okay, but that's not through a direct act. Okay, so that's one way of expanding the list from 4 to 13. Now we have another expanded list. Let's take a look. So it's about 10 lines from the bottom. Tani Rabbi Chia by the asterisk, beginning of line. Tani Rabbi Chia, Esim Arba Avos Nezikin. Rabbi Chia's break at 24 categories of Nezikin. Okay, so we had 13 before from Rabbi Yoshaya, and now we're going to add 11 to that. So let's see what 11 they are. Tashlume kefel, paying double in case of burglary. Tashlume arba v'chamisha, 4 and 5. If it's a burglary and then the animal is slaughtered or sold, if it's by an animal.
Just a short set, right?
Short set, right? Exactly, an ox or a sheep. V'gana v'gazlin, burglary, which would be the principal, not the double, or gazlin or theft, which would also be the principal. So we're up to 4 extra ones. Vedim zomimim, false witnesses that are then found to have been in collusion or whatever. So that's 5. If they testify about money, they pay money. The onus v'hamefata umotzi shemra. The rapist, the seducer, and the one who libels his wife for not being a virgin, for having committed adultery. So we're up to 8. V'amatami v'amadameh v'amenasech, which are really 3 that normally are part of a rabbinic breita. They're not in a mishnah. They're not in a pasuk. So they're not avos nezikin. These 3 are the first that are not in the psukim, and yet to be called avos nezikin because it's like a classic case of Tanaitic teaching that somebody who makes a person's grain tameh, truma tameh, right, or who mixes it up with who mixes truma and chulin together, or pours somebody's wine to avodah zarah. Well, now the stuff becomes either worthless or worth less. Anyway, you like it, huh? Anyway, but it's not visible. It says a cheno nikar. Okay, so you really could call that 1, and it's really not in the psukim. But we're going to call it 3, which now gets us an additional 11 for a total of an additional 11, which makes us up now to 24. Okay, v'hani kleisar plus the 13 that we had, ha'esrim v'arba, it's 24. Okay, so now we're going to ask, why did the previous list not include this? If we're looking to expand, in what way conceptually has this list even broadened itself from the previous list? Rabbi Yoshaya might time a lo tani hani. So why did Rabbi Yoshaya not teach this whole list? Because he got us up to 4 to 13. Why not add these? Because many of the things on this list are not compensation, are not mamon, they're knas, they're fines. So yes, they're monetary payments you make, but they're not compensatory, and therefore he was only interested in the types of compensatory payments. So the Gemara says, now not everything on this list. So we're going to look at the ones that are not knas. The Gemara says, Gana v'gazin de mamonahu. How about a burglary when you're paying just the principal? Let's say you admitted that you were a burglar, so you don't pay the kefel. Or a gazlin, where you always only pay the principal. That's compensation. Listni, why not list it? Haktanile, shomerchinim v'ashoel. No, because he already listed the shomer. Now, really? Shomer and a ganav is not the same. So what you have to understand here is the rabbinic principle that if you consciously swears falsely as a shomer, and you say, oh, the stuff got stolen, the stuff got burgled, okay, and it was nignav, it was nignav, and you take an oath, then you are treated like a ganav and a goslin. Now, by gazan, it's not such a big nafkamina, but it is a big nafkamina by a ganav because then you would actually pay double. Okay, if you claimed and took an oath that it was stolen and it wasn't, that a burglary occurred. Okay, so therefore, the Shomrim include a Ganav and a Gazlan type of a case. So that's why he didn't list Ganav and Gazlan. Okay, so the verse says, Rabbi Chia Nami Hatanalei Shomer Chinava Shoel. How about Rabbi Chia? Don't you admit that this list of Shomrim conceptually would include a Ganav Gazlan type of a case? No, Tanam Monadasi Liade Betera, Tanim Monadasi Liade Bisura. No, he teaches both a case of money that initially came into your possession legitimately, you were given it to watch, and then you turned into a Ganav and a Gazlan by taking a false oath. And then conceptually separate, which is completely right, it is conceptually quite different, is when you actually initially took possession of it in transgression, when you actually never had a legitimate right to have it and you stole it from the outset. Actually, what you would even say is that conceptually you need the category of Ganav and Gazlan, and then you could say the Shomrim sometimes become a Ganav and Gazlan. But you want to create those as a conceptually distinct category. Okay. So that explains that. And again, a lot of the other things are knas. How about Eidim Zomim? Is that a knas? Eidim Zomim the Mamonahu Lisni. 1 minute. Eidim Zomim is money. You're not paying more. Now, you might stop and say, whoa, wait a minute. Now, this is gets to an interesting question, which we're going to be dealing with in significant sections of this Masechet. What is the line between compensation and knas, between mamon and knas? So let's look at Rashi. Rashi says im zami mamonahu. The kol demishalim yoser mashizik. If you ever pay beyond the damage, more than the damage, that by definition is a knas. So kigon, kefel, the tashlumi abra v'chamisha. If you're paying more than the actual damage that you caused, the extra you're paying is clearly a knas. Kari knas, it'll come on. Now, another thing that could be a knas is kol davar katsuv hamur b'torah. If it is in payment for damage, but it is not a proportion, or it is not a function of the cost of the amount of damage caused, but it's a fixed amount. So if you're paying a fixed amount, even if it is in compensation for damage, the fact that it's fixed means it's not really compensation. It's somewhat symbolic. It's somewhat arbitrary. You go on chamishim shel onus mafata. Okay, now actually the chamishim onus mafata is not a good example. And Maya Shemoti Shemra, it's funny that Rashi gives that. Kulu Hali Knasa, all that stuff, because all of those actually are also more than the damage. There's a payment for damages in the case of seduction. In the case of Moti Shemra, there were no damages. I mean, I guess you could say damage to reputation. Okay, but a better example would have even been a case of, would have been a case of the 30 that you pay when your ox scores a slave. Okay, because there really is a loss of property, as it were. I mean, obviously, loss of life. Okay, and rather than assessing how much was your slave worth, you pay a fixed amount of 30 shekel, of 30 kesef. So the way to determine whether it's knas is it a payment beyond compensation, or when there is no loss and you're still paying something, or even if there is a loss, but you're not paying equivalent to the loss, you're paying a fixed amount. Those are ways to say it's not real compensation. Rashi is laying that out to explain to you why Eidim Zomimim is presumed to be mamon. Because by Eidim Zomimim, okay, there's a loss, you're paying equivalent to the loss, that's mamon. But somebody might say, 1 minute, right? I mean, maybe that's the paradigmatic case of equivalent. Vasisim lo kasher zamam, it's exactly equal. But somebody could say, wait a minute, Eidim Zomimim can't be tashlumim. You know why Eidim Zomimim can't be tashlumim? Michael, tell us why Eidim Zomimim can't be tashlumim.
It doesn't sound like it. First of all, it could be anything,
Okay, no, but when it is with mamon, why is it not the same? What? Well, right. If the Eidim Zomim admitted, are they off? But that actually raises the question. But the more immediate thing to say is that the normal principle is kasher zaman velo kasher asa, that they only get punished if they were plotting, not if they actually succeeded. So therefore, if they were plotting to do it, then there was no actual loss. So how could you call it mamon if there was no actual loss? Which might be what Rashi is trying to say. Well, okay, but it's still mamon because it's still equivalent to, it's not arbitrary, it's not more than the loss, okay, which is a little funny. But would you call that mamon if it's for the loss they were attempting to cause without there being actual loss? The Gemara sounds like it's prepared to say that, but look at an important Tosfos on Dalet Amud Bet. Tosfos says, "Eidim Zomim, Pirish Riva, Afilu Shilem Al Pi Eidim Zomim Chayavim." By Eidim Zomim, we would have you pay not only if they did not succeed, But when it came to monetary issues, the Eidim Zomim would pay even if they did succeed in making the guy
Where did
pay.
they get that from?
Okay, well, let's take a look. Okay, the lo shaykh b'momen kasher zaman lo kasher afshar de efshar b'chazara. It's never really done what they've done, because you could always just reverse the judgment and the money could go back. So you're always sort of in the kasher zaman. It's never kasher asa in a final way. The court ruled you owe me $100 based on the testimony of Eidim Zomim. It wasn't final what they did, because the court could always tell me to pay the money back, that it was a mistake. Okay, so it's never a full kasher asa. They can't remove the malchus that I got. Okay, they can't reverse the imposed what?
But other cases of class with the
All right. So anyway, that's one explanation. Okay. You don't even need the Riva's explanation that it's not a full kasher asa. Why do we say by Eidim Zomim it's kasher zamam v'lo kasher asa? Because the Torah says kasher zamam, and even though it's a kavachomer, they should be punished when they only plotted. Certainly, they should be punished when they succeeded. But the answer is no. But you can't punish somebody based on kavachomer. But by monetary compensation, you can punish somebody based on a kavachomer. Okay, the gabi mamon onshin minadin. Okay, and then he goes on with that. So it's an actually interesting issue that what Tosos needs to say that because the Gemara thinks Eidim Zomim is mamon, needs to say that Eidim Zomim are paying when they succeeded, not just by monetary issues, not just when they plotted. Because if they're only paying when they plotted, then it would be knas. Okay, so this becomes a very interesting question of how do you define mamon? So by Eidim Zomim you have an amount equivalent to the damage, but for Tosfos it's not enough to say it's equivalent and not arbitrary. You have to say there actually was loss and damage, or else it also wouldn't be mamon.
So the other position that doesn't include Eidim Zomim would say that then if they were successful in...
Let's take a look at what the Gemara says. Okay, the Eidim Zomim de mamona who listening, but all that was to explain why the Gemara thinks it's mamon and not knas. So Sabala Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Akiva. The Amar Ein Mishamim Al Pi Atzman. Just like was said, according to Rabbi Akiva, he says that it is knas. That if they admit that they were Eidim Zomim, even in a monetary issue, they would not pay. So that's why, because there's an opinion that it actually is knas, and that's why it's in Rabbi Chia's list and not in Rabbi Oshaya's list, because Rabbi Oshaya was not dealing with knas. 1 minute. I'm sorry, did I get that right? Yeah, I got that right. So yes, because they're of the opinion that it's knas. Isarlik Rabbi Akiva. Now, 1 minute. You can't say that we're talking within the mindset of Rabbi Akiva and Eidim Zomim is in the knas column, because if that's true, at least need trade avnei shur. We have another av that you should list. 2 types of a shur. What are 2 types of a shur? Listening shur dazik adam, shur dazik shur. Listening shur dazik adam. A shore that gores a shore and a shore that gores a person. Because we just discussed the other day that even if an animal gores a human being, the payment is just straight damages. It's not hospital bills, it's not whatever. But Rabbi Akiva disagrees. Did not. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Aftam Shechava Badan, even if a tame, ox gores a human being, Mishalim b'mos. Actually, I said that wrong. You would not pay the extra type of personal injuries, but Rabbi Akiva says that if a short gores a person, even though there would be no personal injury payment, you would only pay for the loss, but it would not be half payment. The idea that an ox only pays half the first 3 times is only when it gores property. But when it gores a human, it pays full. But
just nezek, meaning like
nezek,
which is the
correct
depreciation on the slave market, right?
Exactly. Okay, so you would just pay how damages, but not hospital bills, not pain, suffering, etc. But it would not be half. Okay, if a tame ox gores a human, you pay in the balance the full amount. What does the balance mean? So the case in the Mishnah over there was that an ox and a person got into a fight. Okay, so the person did damage to the ox, and the ox did damage to the person. So you figure out whose damage was more. If the person did more, and Rabbi Akiva says, so what you really should say is, if you pay half by the ox, you figure out each column of damage. The human pays full damages to the owner of the ox, and the owner of the ox pays half damages to the owner of the person. Rabbi Akiva says no. You figure out the difference, and if the difference is there were more damages to the person, then the owner of the ox pays full. Okay, so that's just a special case. But what's really relevant is he says if an ox scores a person, it's not half damages, it's full damages. So then we should have had a different type of an ox. Let's get the numbers up to 25. So the Gemara says, no, we didn't list that idea, even though we're working within Rabbi Akiva, because Hatave Rabbi Akiva Ligzize. Rabbi Akiva broke his I'm trying to get the exact phrase. It's like he broke the strength of his argument. I'm trying to remember the exact. They blunted, yeah. Okay, they blunted his argument, is what they said.
Rabbi Akiva has already blunted the force of his ruling.
Yeah, the force of his ruling. Right. Anyway, so he's already blunted his. That's a good
So
word.
how do you translate Gezize?
See, that's what I was looking up. That the Gezize means something like his what?
Rashi says the koach egro.
Yeah, his fist. Right. Thank you. Right. So he.
It could be from a Greek word meaning razor.
A Greek word meaning razor.
No, Ramach
Ramach
is
is a spear,
a
a dagger. Okay, good. He blunted his dagger. Okay, how did he blunt his dagger? Titania, Rabbi Akiva Omer, now that I've said that he pays full, maybe he pays full when he damages a person even from like cash and not just from the body of the animal. Let's say the full payments would exceed the cost of the ox itself. Would you pay even that? Talmud Lamar, Yaselo, you shall do to him, Migufo. Mishalim ve'enu mishalim min aliyah. So you pay. He only pays from the actual body of the ox, even when it's paying for damaging a human, and even when it's full payments. And you don't pay from other types of property.
Does everyone agree
Okay,
to that
so
part, or
no,
just
well,
Rabbi Akiva?
only
But tell me.
everybody else doesn't have to agree because everybody else disagrees with Rabbi Akiva. Says it's only half. So of course it's only half. It's from the body of the animal. But Rabbi Akiva is saying that the whole basic idea is paying half by a goring ox is from the body of the animal. But Rabbi Akiva is saying even though I'm saying full, it's limited still to the cost of the body of the animal. It won't be from your general assets. Now,
What do you mean body of the animal? What do you mean?
if the animal's
Kill the
worth
animal?
1,000, no. If the animal's worth, I mean, I'm sort of being vague because we're going to get to it. But if the animal's worth $1,000 and gores a person and causes $900 of damage, according to Rabbi Akiva, okay, then I now am a 9/10 owner in your ox. Okay, if it causes $1,000 of damage, I'm a full owner of your ox. If it causes $1,200 of damage, I'm the full owner of your ox, but you do not pay me the extra $200. Okay, so it's limited to the cost of the body of the animal, and actually the way it happens is I become a owner in the animal for that amount. All right, so because it's not a full payment of full damages, we didn't list it. Now Tosa says, I don't care that it's not full. It's still different than the other time. One is half and one is the full amount, limited to the cost of the body of the animal. But why isn't it still listed as a separate category? So we're going to see in a few minutes that the list of these categories, the reason they're listed is to tell you that the payment comes from the best of the property. Okay, that's why they're all being put into one big, list. And therefore, it does is so. Therefore, that's why this wasn't included, because this would be a type of payment that does not come from the best of the property. It only comes from the body of the animal. Okay, so we're within Rabbi Akiva. Eidim Zomimim is Knas. That's why it's in Rabbi Yechia's list and not Rabbi Oshaya's list. And even though according to Rabbi Akiva, there's another category of an ox that causes a person pays full, since that is not a standard full payment, it's only from the body of the animal, we are not going to put it in, we're not going to have it as a separate category.
We understand these days that we don't do honest father because you don't do knasot anymore, right? But what do we do like these days? Like about Nizek, the famous case of Travis.
We're going to get to all of it.
What do we do?
Okay, we're going to get to it. We have a whole Masech in front of us. So it's going to be a definite addressing of that question. So the Gemara says like this. Okay, now moving on. How about those? Now, rape, seduction, and libel. Now, the mamona, that's mammon. Now, Motzi Shemra is not mammon. That was libel. I mean, again, you could say that you're paying for defamation of character, but it's interesting. In general, when it's not the specific case in the Torah by the husband accusing his bride of having committed adultery, we don't normally have payments for defamation of character, which is an interesting issue. Okay, so that's considered a knas. So that was just thrown in because it's part of the list. But onus and mefata, the rape and the seduction, that's a mammon. One of the payments there is, I mean, it's hard to understand in the case of seduction, but in the case of rape, anyway, also, how do you figure out what it means that now this, girl was raped? What does that mean in terms of affecting her value on what is it, the slave market, the bride market? We'll get to all of those. Actually, a lot of that was in ksufas. But anyway, there is a payment there that is considered a mammon payment. So why wasn't that included in the earlier lists that in the list of Rabbi Oshaya? So the Gemara says listing. No, so the Gemara says, look, manafshach. Inezek Tanale, because any type of payment of these cases is going to be one of the personal injury payments. If we're talking about the payment by the case of onus and mefate, of nezek, of damages, so Rabbi Yoshia's list had personal injury and listed damages. Itzar, if it's about the suffering, tanale, that was also in Rabbi Yoshia's list. Boshet, tanale. If it was Boshet, that was also in his list, meaning all the payments here that are not knas payments are personal injury payments. And Rabbi Yoshia's list had personal injury. Pagam, if it's what we call the pagam, the sort of like, what would be the way, the stigma or something.
That would be defamation of character.
No. But anyway, hainu nezek, that for us is considered to be nezek. We worry about all that when it gets to onus and mefate. But what is the only thing about onus and mefate that's not part of personal injury? Knasa, the fine that you pay. Knasa lokamayim, we've already got through saying that we're not talking about the fine. So the onus mefate and motzi shemra, a major element of that, of onus and mefate, is personal injury. That was in Rabbi Yoshia's list. Rabbi Chia was adding them because there was also a fine associated with them. Rabbi Chia is adding knas. Rabbi Yoshia is not dealing with knas. Okay. Last part of the list. Okay. Okay, making the grain tameh, or mixing truma with chulin, or pouring the wine. Those are cases of damages, but not visible damages. But it is damages. The mamonahu listni, so that's standard monetary compensation. So why wasn't it in Rabbi Yoshia's list? Manavshach. So says, because make up your mind. If we consider that type of damage to be a form of classic damages, even though it's not visible, so hatanale nezek. So we've already dealt with when a human damages somebody's property. If it's not considered real damages and it's only the rabbis make you pay, and it's really only a type of a fine, but it's not real, it's certainly not biblical payment of damages. So then knasa, it's a type of a fine, knasa lokamayri, and we're not dealing with fines. So either that's just a different example of damages, or it's a payment that's not about damages. It's a type of a knas, and we're only dealing with mama. So that's why it wasn't in Rabbi Yoshia's list, but it is in Rabbi Chia's list. Now the Gemara is going to focus on, why is it in Rabbi Chia's list? Lema, let us say, because Rabbi Chia has a kinu nikr lo shmei hezek. He must hold that this isn't real damages, that it's a fine, and that's why he had this as extra categories. The shmei hezek, if it was a real example of just standard damages, hatanale nezek, he already has nezek. So why does Rabbi Chia, who has these as separate categories, why does he list them separately unless he's telling us that this isn't classic nezek, that this is actually a type of a fine? So the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. It could be a type of a nezek, but nevertheless, it's important to list them separately. Tana hazeka the minkara, Tana hazeka the lo minkara. He wanted to tell you there's classic nezek when it's visible, and there's non-visible nezek. Yes, the halacha is that that's a type of a nezek, and it's paying because you pay for mazik, but it's important to identify this as another type of damages, just so it should be clear that you paid for this case as well. It's sort of like the Gemara before about he doesn't have to say it's lo shmei hezek. He could say it's shmei hezek, but he just wants to distinguish between two types of nezek, even though both of them are nezek. Like the Gemara said before, by shomer and a ganav. A shomer could be a type of a ganav, but we want to distinguish between two types of a ganav.
But it's sheino nikar. But it's
shmei hezek, right? Okay, but the question is,
just listing it because these are examples in the Torah.
Right. Well,
he's not trying to put them in categories.
No, but first of all, this isn't examples in the Torah. They're only examples in Chazal. But I agree with you that what the Gemara is saying is like he wanted to deal with like the classic.
He wasn't dealing with conceptual categories.
Yes, but then what are you going to do? Let's just list every single mission or Masechet as one of the Avos Nezikin, right? You have to say there's some way in which it's distinct. But yes, but anyway, but yes, that's what we're doing. We're trying to cover all the types of cases.
Getting back to Hezek Sheino Nikar, meaning if let's say there's less of it, and then some ways that is Nikar, although I can't see what's left that is damaged. But if I start with a gallon of oil and you poured out half of what is Zara,
so
there's only half an hour. So
that part is Nikar, but the other part is not Nikar.
So that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
yes.
You said we don't pay for unrecognizable damages to property. Oh,
well, we do pay, right?
But we don't pay it for character defamation.
Correct.
Even though that's unrecognizable.
Yeah, but that's a good point. I mean, why do you call that as a Kenu Nikar? Yeah, I mean, the difference is that in one case it makes the object worth less, and in the other case it doesn't make. I mean, it doesn't make you. Yeah, the way we figure out damage is like you as a slave. It's a funny. It's an interesting.
For giving speeches, maybe hire you.
Right, that's an interesting thought. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question about how halacha does not have. You have Yisurim about being Motzi Shemra. You have a classic example about Motzi Shemra. We never sort of abstracted it to create. It's an interesting way of thinking about it. A type of a hezek she'eino nikar, especially if it directly affects your livelihood. Right. It's interesting. Yeah, I have to think about that one. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Now, minyana. Okay. Now, Bishlema, Bishlema Latana Didan, our Tana, the author of our Mishnah that only had 4. So Tana Minyana, he said 4. Limuted Rabbi Yoshaya, because he was not, meaning it's not that he disagrees with anything on Rabbi Yoshaya's list, but conceptually, he wants to talk about a very narrowly defined list. Mamonamazin. Right, or if it includes Adam, only direct damages. So he wants to stay 4 to say, I'm not dealing with these expanded lists. Conceptually, I'm dealing with a small list. Okay, Rabbi Yoshaya, when Rabbi Yoshaya said 13, okay, Tana Minyana, he gave a number, Limuted Rabbi Chia, because he also was dealing with a more limited, it's expanded, but it's not the largest list possible. He wasn't dealing with Knas, he was only dealing with Mammon. And that's why he said 13 to tell you, and not the bigger list of Rabbi Chia. Again, nobody argues on the halacha, just conceptually, what type of what is outside of your list that you have decided you don't want, you're not including in your list. So when Rabbi Chia says 24, what's he coming to say is not on his list. Now you could just say maybe everything is on his list. He just wants you to remember that there are 24 of them. It's a way of remembering. Did I get all of them? 1 minute, and you count, right? But the Gemara assumes that if there's a number, it means that something isn't included. Okay, so that seems to be a pretty incomprehensive list. What's not included? So the Gemara says, "Limute moser umefagel." Okay, here's another case about where your words cause damage and you don't pay. Okay, you hand over, you're an informer to the government about somebody who hasn't paid their taxes or whatever it is, and the government comes and they seize his property. All right, so that's just your words. That causes real damage. Okay, and the fagel is your kohen who's thinking when it's shechting an animal that you're going to eat it at the wrong time or the wrong place, and you make the animal worthless. So why not to say that? I understand why you don't have the case of Pigo, but Kachim lo Kamairi. We're not dealing with Kachim. Okay.
So according to this, the coin will pay then. Because if he doesn't pay, then there's no hezek.
Correct. I mean, it gets to a little hezek kinunikar case, but which we're already including hezek kinunikar. Yes, the coin does pay. Ella Moser, my time. Right. Moser, I'm sorry. Maybe I said it wrong. Yes, I was not suggesting. I'm sorry, because I think David's question got me. It was an excellent question, but it got me thinking in a different direction. Yes, these cases. I'm sorry if I said it wrong. Most in Mefagel, you definitely do pay. Okay, I'm sorry. I think I said it wrong. You definitely do pay. The point of not being on the list is not to suggest that you don't pay for them. It's just to say our list is not all inclusive. There are some things conceptually that we're not dealing with. But yes, you do pay. That's actually going to be at the end, at the 10th parak in Baba Kamma. You inform on the government and you do pay. You're mefagel, you create pigul and you do pay. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted there. Okay, yes, you do pay, but it's not on the list. Okay, so why is it not on the list? So pigul is not on the list because we're not dealing with kachim. Elamoser, but when you hand over, you inform on somebody's property and you actually are going to pay in that case, my time alotani. Why does he not include it in his list? Right? Why conceptually is it not his list? So the Gemara says, no. Shani Moser to Dibura. That's just words. Dibura lo kamairi. And we're not dealing with, we're talking when you just damage through words. Yes, you are going to pay, but it's just through words. Actually, that's the biggest chiddush. That's the thing we should be talking about. That even in that case, you pay. But anyway, we're not dealing with those cases. So the Gemara says, really? We're not dealing with words? Some of the things were just words. So the Gemara says, so 1 minute, I just lost my place. Motzi Shemra, how about the case of libel, the Diburaho, Viktani? That was just words, and that was listed. So no, Dibur the Ispa Masahu. That's only words followed by an act. It's only if he's libels his wife, his bride, after he's had sex with her. But if he hasn't had sex and he just libels her, that would not be in the parsha of the Torah. Because parsha of the Torah is he comes and he says, I had sex with my wife and I discovered she wasn't a virgin, and therefore I'm assuming that she committed adultery. Okay? So actually, if he just spread that libel without having had sex, he would not pay. So it's not just words. Okay, as the Gemara says, Edim Zomim Gibur D'les Pamasu. How about Edim Zomim? They just give their testimony. Okay, so we are talking about cases of damage with words. The Kitani, and it's listed, no. Hasam avgav gleispa masa, even though there is no act. Rachmana karyim ma'aseh. The Torah called it an act. You should do to them like they planned to do to their brother. It's pretty funny. Actually, it didn't call it an act. It said they planned to do. It didn't say that they did to their brother. But somehow, because it's sort of saying they should do for what was they should get paid back for what they did or planned to do. It's almost like considered. The point is, it's considered as if they did it. Okay, so therefore,
I was saying if you actually did do it, they wouldn't be.
I know, that's the irony. Anyway, there's something. So even though this is like the biggest chiddush, that something could be pure words and you could pay for it, the case of informing, right? Nevertheless, we didn't want to include it in our list. Our list is only things that are acts, things that are pure words that have no action. Yes, you have to pay by Moser, but we're not including it. All right. Yes. Yep.
How do we know that the guy actually he's making a false claim? And he's saying that yes, that they had sex.
Right. Maybe he's lying. Right. And how do we know? The related questions you're going to ask is, and let's say he says, wait, you can't make me pay because I was only claiming to have had sex, but I really lied about it. Would you have to actually, who would have the burden of proof? Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but it's a very good question. All right, so the Gemara says like this. So we've got our lists. Everybody agrees pretty much on every single case that you pay. Maybe there's some debate whether you call something knas or mammon, but pretty much everybody agrees. And there's just a question of conceptually what's on your list or not on your list. Okay, what type of list are you creating?
So is Moser saying something true or something false?
We'll see about that.
Meaning, if you actually owe the money to the government,
right,
they're just
so,
getting you to pay something you owe anyway.
Very good. So that's going to be a discussion. 10th parak. Okay, all these things are coming up. All right. So Gemara says this opening sugya is doing a very good job. It's sort of whetting your appetite for a lot of the things that are going to be discussed in the whole Masech. So Gemara says like this. Okay. So where's Gemara is? Okay. Now we have to do with what the lists mean. What's the point of having a list? So for our Tana, Avos meant main categories to tell us that it's not just the cases in the Torah. Those are abstract categories, and there are things that are considered descendants or other cases that are in those categories that have the same halacha. So the purpose of saying it's an av is to tell you there are other types of things that also are called a Karen, and also are called a Shane, and also are called a Bor. Okay? That's the point of calling them an av. Ella, Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Oshaya, Avos, Michlal Dikal Tolados, so they'll say you. Obviously, for them, avos does not mean that there are categories and other things falls in it. What's the category of motzi shemra? What else falls into motzi shemra? What's the category of edim zomer? There's just the thing itself. It's not abstracted and includes other things. So what do you mean by calling them avos? What you really mean is that there are 24 scenarios of paying. But why call them avos? What's the point of having them? Well, okay, but what's the point of having them all on the same list? So the Gemara says, I'm Rabbi Avo, kulan ki avos. They're like the four classic avos nezikin, okay, l'shalem meitav, that if you are going to pay from property and not from land and not from cash or not from other types of cattle, then you're going to have to pay from your best land. Okay, now.
You said property, but not from land?
No, not from cattle, not from cash, not from cattle. Did I say it wrong? Yeah. I don't think I did. I think anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, if you're going to pay from land, okay, then you're going to pay from your best. But if you're going to pay from cattle or from cash or whatever, then it's a different story. But if you're going to pay from land, it has to be your best. Meitav sadeu, meitav karma yishalim. Now, in the Torah, that only says it by v'shilachet bi'iro, which we translate to mean shame and regel. It doesn't say it by anything else. But because of the four avot nezikin, we're going to assume are all linked to one another, and therefore it's going to be true by all the avos nezikin, by all the four of our Mishnah, by shane, regel, Karen, shane, regel, bor, and age. Okay, all the ones that are Mishnah. Now, by putting everything else on this list, okay, and by putting everything else on this list, we are saying that any of these damages, any of these compensations, whether it's shomrim, whether it's ganav, whether it's whatever, if you're paying from land, you're paying from the best land. Now, how do we know that? So my taima, why? What's the reason for that? Asya tachas nesina yishalem kesef. Okay, by all of the four classic avot nezikin, it uses either the word tachas, shalem yishalem shor tachas hashor, okay, or yishalem. I just gave you an example, yishalem, or netina, which is like kashir. What's the case? Well, if you look at Rashi and kesef, let's look at Rashi. Tachas nesina, the first middle-sized line in Rashi. In all the cases of the things in the list we mentioned, ksiv o tachas. V'gamina tachas mishur muad. Dichsiv they shur tachas hashur. Okay, so shur tachas hashur, and again, assuming that any of the 4 avot nezikin is going to be meitav. Mahasami meitav, the gamar mishain v'regel. Dichsiv be meitav sadeyu. So shain and regel is the paradigm. Okay, meitav sadeyu, and then it applies to the other 4. Avkan meitav. Okay, shimbal shalim karka. If you're paying land, if you pay cash or cattle, it's different. If you're paying panzlanizak, yishalezeko magbil mina idis, the best land. Okay, so either it says tachas, shur tachas hashur, or nesina. Now, if it says nesina, where does it say nesina by the 4 avot nezikin? The government nesina mishur shanaga chasevet. Chsibei kesef shloshim shkalim yitain la'adonav. So it says nesina by one of the cases of the avos nezikin. Oh, yishalem. What does it say yishalem? Shein v'regel. See, meitav kamo yishalem. Okay, that's the best one. Okay. Oh, kesef. V'gami mi bor. See, be kesef yashiv li balav. So in all of the 4 avot nezikin, you either have the word kesef, yishalem, nesina, or tachas. And by one of them, by shein and regel, it says you pay from the best land. So then we link and say all the avos nezikin you pay from the best land. And then we're going to now say and now we're going to say everything else on this list has one of those key words in it. Tachas, nesina, yishalem, kesef. One of the words that appears in the avos nezikin, and therefore they also are going to pay from the best land. If you want to know where those words appear, you can read the rest of the Rashi for yourself. Okay, so there are 4 main. So the first step of avot is you take the concrete cases in the Torah of a well and of a fire and of an ox, and you say it's not just a physical well. It's a conceptual category. It's abstracted. It's an av, and there are toladot. But there's another point that those 4, because they're linked to one another, they're like the case of shein and regel. And if you're paying land, you pay the best land. And now Rabbi Yoshai and Rabbi Chia say, let me give you a full list of all types of damages, of compensatory damages. What's the point? Who needs a list? You need a list to tell you all of these, because they have one of those key words in them, are going to also pay from the best land. It's also just convenient to put all the types of different mammons together and compensation together, just to organize information. But the Gemara wants to understand that there's some halachic significance. I guess the point that Gemara is saying is not just, why not use the word avot? Why not just say there are 24 payments of mammon? So not just a list you want because you want to organize, your information. You want to just pull together what are all the different types of ways you can pay. But the use of calling them, the purpose of calling them avot is to tell you they're like the classic 4 avot that they will pay from the best land. Okay, now we move on in the Mishnah. We got Pshat in the Mishnah. We've got other types of lists. Moving on to the Mishnah. Lorei ashor kerei hamave. So Ashur is not like Mava. We've already explained what that means. Either it's shein and regel or Adam and Shur, but they both have in common is that they are living. They are Yorah Chayim. My Kamma. So what's the point of this saying this lo hare? What's the Mishnah doing? So Amar Zvi Mishmei Rabbi Hohi Kamma. This is what the Mishnah is doing. Lichter Rachman Achada. Why just give me one of the 4 avot? Right? Why do I need all 4? V'teisi idach mine, and let me derive the other ones from one case. Okay? So the Mishnah is telling you is you can't learn the others out. Each one has something distinct. Sure, shein has something that regel doesn't have. Regel has something shein doesn't have. Let's learn out from 2 of them. Oh no, because they both have something other things don't have. They're both alive. Other things aren't alive. So the point of the Mishnah is to tell me you couldn't have learned it out from just 1 or 2 of them. Okay? My Kamma. So how do you read this next line? This is what the next line is saying. You see, you didn't know we were going to get through with it after today. Okay. Just break 2 of them. So you can't learn everything out from shein, because shein has hana. You can't learn it out from regel, because regel is hezeko matzui. You can't learn it out, learn it out from the 2 of them combined. Learn it out from the common denominator. No, you can't learn it out from the common denominator, because they are both ruachayim. Okay, learn it out from 3. Learn out from them and 8. No, you can't learn out from 3 because they all go in damage and their bore stays in its place. So the whole point is to point out you needed all of them. You couldn't have learned it out from just 1 or 2 or 3. Okay? Now, the problem is that if you really think about it, you can learn it out from fewer, because that's what Rav is going to say. So, then it says you can't even learn 1 from 2. Amar Rava, but really, the kulahu, if any of them, if you did bor plus any one of the other ones, then you really could include everything. Levar mi keren. The one thing you couldn't include is keren, mishum deikla mifrach malakulu shekein muadim mitchilatan. Except for keren, because keren is weaker than all of them, because everything else has a propensity to damage, and you pay full damages at the outset. Keren does not have a propensity to damage. What does Rava mean? Okay, because the way the Mishnah was structured, right, is it says like this, right? Shur and Maveh are Ruach Chai. Okay, again, whether this is Adam or Shane and Regel, well, these are live things. Okay, so you couldn't necessarily say that you have to pay when the thing that does the damage is not live. Add to it Aish. Okay, so now let me learn from all of this that you can pay. No, because what all of these have is Darkan Leilechu Lazi, right? So you can't apply it to something like a boar that doesn't go out, that stands still. Okay, so that's why you needed boar.
Right. So
Great.
just
but swap out that boar is at the bottom of the list. So this is the weakest thing, because this doesn't even go out in damage. You come to it. So just learn everything out from boar. You can't, sure, you could have learned it out from these things. These are more liable, make more sense. But learn it out from the thing that makes the least sense to be liable for. But what you can't learn out, but the reason you can't just say, if it tells me boar, I can figure out everything else, is boar has one thing that makes it very, very liable for damage, which is what? It is.
It's completely your fault. I think in some ways it's completely fault. It can get out of your control.
Meaning its whole creation, it begins its life as a hazard. Okay? There's another thing as well, what I was going to say, which is also a masa of garmulo. You directly made the boar. Okay, these other things you didn't make. Well, you made the fire, but the fire then traveled further. Anyway, okay, but it's chilas asiyasa l'nezek. So therefore, you can't learn everything from boar because these other things aren't created as hazards. But what Rav is saying is okay, but learn it out from boar plus one other thing. Okay, so then I would say, look, if you're chayav by boar, which doesn't go out in damage, you should certainly be chayav by everything else which goes out in damage. But maybe you're chayav by boar because it's beginning of its existence as a hazard. Oh, but a shore's beginning of existence isn't a hazard. A fire's beginning of existence, you might say it's a little bit, but not the same as a boar. It's not in the middle of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so these other things don't start life as a hazard. So you don't. You don't need the fact that you start life as a hazard because that's not true about this. You don't need the fact that they go out in damage because that's not true about boar. So if I eliminate the distinct characteristics, I then have the abstraction of which applies to any type of a thing that I have an obligation to watch. So Rava says you could really learn out everything from boar plus one of them. You didn't need all four categories. Now, what you could not learn out was keren, was goring. Why did you learn out goring?
Different types of
because goring, no, meaning if it had
different. We said that. He said that half damage.
No, but we wouldn't have known it was half damage. Well, you could say we would have known half damage. But if the Torah had never said goring, I would have said, sure, you're chayav by boar and aish and shane and regel, because those are things that an animal will naturally do, are natural types of things to expect. But normal animals don't go out and gore. So maybe I should be exempt, fully exempt. I won't even pay half. Okay, I would never have known that you paid when an animal goes out and gores because that is not its natural propensity to do that.
But it has the potential.
It has yes, but nevertheless, if the Torah had told me you're chayav by boar and aish and shane and regel, I would have said to the Torah maybe if something completely unexpected, my animal goes and gores, maybe I should be totally exempt. Right? Why would I think I would pay half? Maybe I could say if it did it 3 times, I could figure out that I should be chayav. First 3 times, I would logically say it's completely unexpected. I should be fully exempt. So the one thing you couldn't have learned out was keren. So basically, at the end of the day, what Rav is saying is that you needed 3. You needed boar plus 1 to learn out, to learn out everything else, and you needed keren because keren anyway you couldn't learn out by itself. Okay. But kishadis boar beinayu, if you add boar amongst them, asya kulu b'me'atzad, you learn everything out by the common name. And levami keren, the one thing you couldn't have learned out is if it was shur and keren, it was boar and keren, by the way, right? Then you could have, because here you've got, let's say, just put them all up there, keren, shane, regel, and adam. Okay, so if it was boar and keren, then you could have learned everything out. If you're going to pay keren, even though it doesn't have a propensity, you should certainly pay everything else that has a propensity. Okay? But everything, but maybe I would have included boar because that's stationary. Oh, but if you pay, so therefore I had to say boar. but it's not. But that's chilas asiyas ulenezek. Okay, so anyway, fine. If it was Karen and Bor, you could have learned out everything. Okay, that even though that you don't need chilas asiyas ulenezek, you don't need kavanas lahazik, and even something that it doesn't have a propensity to do. But if it was Bor plus one of these, you would have learned out most of them, but you still would have needed Karen. Okay, but you certainly don't need everything, is what Rava is saying. All right. So if you have Shor plus Bor plus one, you could learn out everything but Karen.
Right, but then it gets kind of complicated, and that's why you want to say this.
But anyway, that's why we have this big Rashi, because Rashi works through all the combinations. Okay, wow. But Bor plus one is everything but Karen. Bor plus Karen is everything. Okay, now he says like this: Ulamanda Amar Adaraba Karen Adifa Shekavnasa Lahazik. And according to the one that says, actually, Karen is certainly going to be liable, even though it doesn't have a propensity to do it, because it intentionally damages. Afilu Karen Namiyasi, you could even learn out Karen. Now, who is this Manda Amar? Who is the one that says that even though Karen doesn't have a propensity to do it, and nevertheless, the fact that it's doing it intentionally clearly makes it more chumrah?
So therefore, you should come in what way? I mean, you pay Nizek Shalom?
It's more obvious. Well, yes, and it's more obvious you would pay. But who is the one that makes it like calculus? It says like clearly you put the two together. It doesn't have a propensity, but it's Kavanas Alazik. Kavanas Alazik wins out, and it's more chomer, and you could have learned it out. So who is this person that says this? So Rashi says the last of the medium-sized lines of Rashi. Never is explained who this person is, who this opinion is. Tosu says, I'll tell you who this person is, because here's who it is. It's you. No, it is. There's a very important debate that we are going to come up with in about 10 days about why do you pay half damages by Karen? Are stam shvari b'cheskas shimur or stam shvari b'cheskas shimur? Meaning, what we've been saying that an animal does not have a propensity to gore. Is that really true? Okay. Do you say that fundamentally animals do not have a propensity to gore? And if it gores, you're really an honest, and you really should pay zero. But you know what? You could have gone the extra mile. It's like right by the line. Okay, in terms of if you were to draw a line, what's the likelihood that it'll gore? It's just under the line of minimum care that you should be doing. So technically, you didn't have to watch it, and technically, you should be paying zero. But we want you to be a little bit more vigilant, and therefore, we're going to make you pay half. And that would understand that the half payment by Karen is a knas, because technically, you should be paying nothing. The other way to say it is the exact opposite. It's just over the line. Actually, in terms of minimum care that you need, there's just enough likelihood that an animal might gore that you should be doing that. So technically speaking, you should be paying full. But it is so close to that line that we're going to go easy on you the first 3 times and make you pay half. According to that, the payment of Karen is mammo, not the knas. That's going to be a debate later on. So Tosa says that's what's going on here. Can I say, if I hadn't known Karen, I wouldn't have paid, okay? It's only true if I say that Karen fundamentally is below the line, does not have a propensity to gore. But if I say technically Karen is just above the line, then even if it had not been written, I would have made you pay. I actually would have made you pay full, okay? And the finish of the Torah is that you don't pay full, you pay half, according to that way of thinking about it. But that's what he says. Karen is adifa. It's not only because it's kavanas lahazik, but that your assumption that it doesn't have a likelihood to gore is actually wrong. Technically, it has enough of a likelihood that you should be paid. Yes.
I have a knas approach to that, because you're imposing a fine on somebody who you think was negligent in some way.
Well,
right?
it wasn't
okay,
as vigilant as they should have been.
Right. But
Right.
the other perspective from Bama, you're doing it on the back of the guy who got damaged.
Right. I understand. Like, why should I lose out just because the Torah wants to go easy on you? But I don't know a full answer, except that it's two ways of saying it's a borderline case. Okay, what it's really saying, if you want to another look at it, are you negligent or not? This is exactly a borderline case, so we're going to split it. Okay, and then the only question is, okay, but conceptually, which way would you lean on that to define it as knas or as mama? I understand what you're saying, because what I'm saying is it's not clear. Like, if you say it's clearly over the line, then why should the other guy suffer? But if we all can agree it's a borderline case, right, then you sort of understand it. But at the end of the day, we have to categorize it as knas or as mama. Anyway, we'll get more time to discuss that in about 10 days. It's coming up at the end of the parak. Now, anyway, so Lumanda Amar, Karen Adifa, so reading this like Tosfos, according to the approach that Karen is actually the strongest thing to be liable for, because it's intending to damage, and because as I just explained, technically speaking, it's over the line, and you really do, and it really does have a propensity enough that you're negligent. If you look at it, you could have learned out everything. Bor plus any one, you would have gotten everything. Okay, you said Tzara Shava Shebehen Shedarkan Lahazi Kushmiras Analecha. So if that's truing, so why did the Torah have to give me 4 categories? Give me 2 categories. Okay, to tell you, because each category has special halachot. It's not just a big generic. Anything you should be watching, if it damages, you're liable for payment. By putting it in one of the 4 categories, some distinctive halachot apply to each case. What are the distinctive halachot? Karen, Karen, we just said that the first 3 times you pay half, afterwards you pay full. So it's important to know if you put something into the Karen category. Shein v'regel, the eating and the trampling, the potron b'reshut harabim, to exempt you in the public domain. We discussed that yesterday because they are either just because of public policy, we have to let people have their animals in the public domain, or because it's piyav hanizak, the fact that you leave your stuff exposed in reshut harabim where you know there are going to be animals means that you are contributory negligence. But it's important to know that there's that idea, and that if you put something in a shein and regel category, you'll be exempt in the public domain. Bor, a well, listor barta kelim. That's going to be going to be a strange one. We'll talk about that. But we understand later that if my vessels break in the well, my camel falls down and he has vessels on its back, that the pots and pans or whatever break, that actually you don't have to pay. Rabbi Yehuda the mechayev al niske kelim before. Rabbi Yehuda that says you pay for when vessels get damaged. Listor barta hadam. If a person not gets injured but dies in the well, you're exempt. So there are exemptions for the case of the well. Adam, why does the Torah say a person pays when he damages something else? L'chayvo bar b'dvarim, to tell you cases of personal injury. That if he actually damages not property but another person, there's going to be all those additional payments. Aish, how about fire? Why did that have to be written? Lifter boat tamun, because we're going to find out later that if the fire burns down a haystack and there's something buried in the haystack, the classic needle, right? Anyway, you're exempt on things that were buried, only on things that are exposed.
So this means something that's buried underground, like if the fire.
No, it could also mean that. Rabbi Yehuda the mechayev al niski tambei. How about Rabbi Yehuda that says you're chayev for things that are buried, for things that are not exposed? So what does it mean? Does it make to put something in the age category? So what are you including, meaning what's the purpose of the age category? If the fire, let's say, burns stones or burns like the surface of the ground, so it doesn't destroy something. It's not like something burns up, right? You had your hay and now you don't have your hay.
Now got blackened by
smoke. Chars something, okay? And Raji said that's not like a classic type of a thing that fire does, okay, or whatever, but it doesn't really fully consume it. So to tell you that in that case, actually, you are going to be exempt. You're only chayev, okay? Women, no, I'm sorry, you are chayev. Excuse me. I'm sorry, you are chayev. Okay, chayav. Right. So you might have thought, right. I'm sorry, right. You might have thought, 1 minute. Right. You might have thought that you were not chayev because that is not a thing you should have expected, or
I would have thought that's very expected.
I know. I don't exactly get why I would have thought it's not chayev. What?
That's what I just said.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Rashi calls it l'chayva b'hani denab me'osadeh demasnisin hamazul l'chayva davar she'eno ru'uyla she'in ikar eish b'kach. That's not the classic fire. I don't understand. It's a classic damage of fire. I mean, tire is normally made to consume fuel and not to char things. I don't really get why that's such a chiddush, but the chiddush of Eish is that you're chayev even in that case. Now, what we're going to pick up tomorrow is, okay, you've got 4 categories, and each one has its special laws, and now you've got this big catch-all abstract category, okay? What happens when you can't fit something neatly into one of the 4? Does it get caught by this big abstract category? And if so, which of the laws do you apply to it? Right? How do you deal with the fact that you both have 4 distinct categories, each one with its distinct laws, and you have one big, umbrella abstract category? So what are the unique laws that apply to that?
Sorry, what's your big what's abstract?
So if I have something that's not exactly age and not exactly born, not exactly sure, but I include it because it's tzara shaveh, because it's my property and I have a responsibility to watch it. So what laws apply to it? Am I chayiv in rishus harabim? Do I pay half? right? You know, what are which of the laws apply to it when you have this big abstract category as well? So that's what we're going to continue with tomorrow, is looking at that broader category now that we've identified 4 concrete ones, and the fact that combined they give you some big abstract rule. Okay,
Are you going to specify a person's not liable if he